We are heading right now off to the River Cree Resort Casino hotline to bring aboard a Canadian hockey legend, Ron MacLean. Ron, thank you so much for doing this today.
What did you resolve, Brenden, about the Oilers last night?
What did I resolve? I don't even know what to say about it at this point, Ron. It seems like a lot of frustrated people in the stands, a lot of frustrated people in the room. I don't know where they go from here.
I would hire Mark Messier. Has that been kicked? I know everybody will have a panic attack that it's going back to that well again, but what do you think about that?
That's an interesting one, and actually that's not a name that gets floated around here a lot. It's
probably because of that, right? The fear that it'll be tarnished by this association with the past, the glorious past, but he'd be my guy. That's the first thing I would do. I mean, to just look at the roster now and say, what's happening, I think it's easy to pinpoint the injuries on the blue line, and then maybe the goaltending has just not been up to snuff. But I would, since you've got a position open, I would go get Mark.
Interesting. And what do you make of sort of the leadership of this group? And this has been the theme of today's show, Ron, is just one of, it seems like the team, whenever they're faced with adversity, crumbles.
Yeah. Well, and that's first game back, right? So that's always a hard game in any event. So that third period, they just have this collapse. And obviously the overtime defeats on the weekend were crushing. And they do look vulnerable. But the only way out of that, for my money, is goaltending. I really think you need Grant Fuhr and Andy Moe gave those young Edmonton Oilers, although they had veteran leadership on those teams, but they had such great goaltending. And I think that's what usually gets you out of the trouble you're in. Calgary was starting to waffle, and Mike Smith was struggling, and David Riddick came in, and it's, solved just like that. Winnipeg, same thing. Connor Hellebuck found his game when they brought in Steve Mason as a backup for whatever reason. That seemed to turn him around. So I just think they need a save at the right moment. But I also think it would be great to bring in a guy like Mark, who is one of the ultimate leaders. So that's it's funny. We're here in Swift Current for Scotiabank Hockey Day in Canada, and obviously they had the crash in 1986, and then the Humboldt Broncos tragedy last year on April the 6th. These two teams are affiliates, the Broncos of Humboldt and Swift Current. And the thing that I've kept saying since April the 6th is I cannot get over the leadership of the Humboldt Broncos. Kevin Geringer, their president, Darcy Hogan, the coach, Mark Cross, the assistant coach, Logan Schatz, the captain, every single one of them on a Junior A franchise in rural Saskatchewan looked like they could step in and run the Montreal Canadiens or the Edmonton Oilers. It's an amazing organization, and you need that. You do need that leadership. You're right.
So, Ron, you just teed me up perfectly for this. I want to talk to you because Hockey Day in Canada is coming up. Your knowledge and passion for small-town hockey, I think, is pretty well unrivaled. And I just want to know where it all stemmed from and how you found yourself in the role as sort of the voice of that small-town hockey community.
Well, just listening to Eileen Bell do the news, right? We worked together at CKRD in Red Deer in the 1970s, and I can remember getting involved in the broadcasts of that Junior A franchise, the Rustlers, and going up and down Highway 2, and I'd sit in the wheel well just like Tyler Bieber, the broadcaster for the Humboldt Broncos, would have been standing up at the front talking to the coaches. I stood there with Cliff Bailey, the equipment manager, driving the bus, and we would share hockey stories up and down Highway 2, and I would look forward to the Saratoga in Edmonton for a bite to eat after the game against the Traders or the Saints or the Crusaders, and would always wonder how far our radio signal, CKRD's, reaches at night when they cut the power back. But that was where the dream all began in the 70s. And it taught you right there and then, that Sid Cranston was the best player on the Fort Saskatchewan Traders. And he was as big in my eyes as Mark Messier was with the Oilers. So you got hooked on it. You got to believe in the people in the game. I can remember the coach, Wynn Dempster, used to be jumping over the glass to get up to the broadcast booth to do the post-game show with me. And he took it so seriously. He was trying to market the game, trying to market the Rustlers, and I had such great respect for it. And Edmonton, obviously, because I'm here in Saskatchewan, Claire Drake's dad was an educator at Yorkton, and that's, such a river of wisdom came through Claire Drake. Our guy at the Red Deer College was Al Furchuk, and he learned at the annual symposium there. Ken Hitchcock was at it, Dave King was at it, and so on. So it was all nurtured in those years in the 70s.
Chatting right now with Hockey Night in Canada's Ron MacLean. An absolute honor to have you on the show right now. Tell me about the research, Ron. I volunteered both at Hockey Day in Canada when it was in Kamloops back in 2016 and at some of the hometown hockey events. So I've seen how you interact with the people at events like Hockey Day in Canada and the hometown hockey stuff. You seem to know something about so many people in so many of these towns that nobody's ever heard of. And I want to know, are you just that well connected? Is there research? Do you have help with producers? How does that all come to be before?
For sure, it's a mix of that. I do have help from producers, but I do like to research endlessly, and that was taught to me by a guy named Wayne Heinrich at the radio station in Red Deer. He was the program director, and he said, Ron, the general rule is 10 hours of prep for every 1 hour you're on the radio. And I don't think I ever got there, but I'm quite a stickler for, I've just been spending the last half hour watching a 40-minute interview with the Hunter brothers, who are going to sing on stage tonight here in Swift Current, and I just enjoy it. I know you do too. We all love to learn, right? So research is such a critical part of it, and sad reality is, 6 months out from Kamloops, I probably can't remember half the things I said or knew, but I can usually refresh, that's in the new world order. It's not hard to get that information, and it's just a joy to learn these things. And, like tonight, we've got a guy singing here, First Nations artist from Manitoba, who wrote a song for this. It's kind of a mix of music and hockey at the concert they're going to do in Swift Current tonight, and Leonard Sumner is his name, and he wrote it based on that book and movie Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. And just to sit and listen to him last night tell stories about the Cree and the Anishinaabe history around this area was spellbinding. Both Tara and I and a young artist named Ryan Bolt, we just sat listening to this guy and learned. And that's what elders can do for you. That's what experience, if you are lucky like we are to get around it, you can soak in a bunch.
How long have you been doing the hometown hockey circuit now? Quite a few years, I would think.
Yeah, five years. So it's funny because Scotiabank Hockey Day is our 19th, and it really is the show that birthed Rogers Hometown Hockey. So we thought when we first started Hockey Day that it would kind of be, maybe 2 or 3 years, and that'd be enough of the whole grassroots thing. But in the end, you just get so much benefit. Like, everybody wants to come and do it. Chris Hadfield when we're in Sarnia, or Rick Hansen when we're in Vancouver, and all the Oilers are always gracious. They'll come back. Wayne's done it in Brantford, and Mark's done it in St. Albert, and everybody wants to shine a light on the people that got them there. So it's an easy sell to keep the show going, and it's a little bit of a grind to go from Saturday night to Sunday, and sometimes it's a long connection, but it's such a great synergy to be able to bring stories about what Don Cherry was doing last night to the viewer wherever we do the Rogers Hometown Hockey. And conversely, all the stories that I learn on the 25 stops this winter, guaranteed they'll show up in the playoffs. Last year we had Vegas, George McPhee's Guelph, and Gerard Gallant's Summerside. We'd been to their two towns for Rogers Hometown Hockey, so it always benefits.
We are chatting with Hockey Night in Canada's Ron MacLean right now. It's Brenden Escott filling in for Bob Stauffer on Oilers Now. You've been to so many places around the country, Ron, and I'm quite confident you don't have a favorite, but is there a community in particular where you've really connected, or maybe someone in the community that really stood out to you?
Well, one of the first things that hit me was the coaches of the midget AAAs, because Ken Hitchcock was a great coach, obviously, in Sherwood Park with that program, and we had a guy named Dave Manning, and we have another great coach in Red Deer with the Optimist Chiefs, now called the Sutter Club Optimist Chiefs. But I found in the first season, we went to Burnaby, and there was a midget AAA coach named John Batchelor, and we went over to Dollar des Ormeaux in Montreal, and there was a coach named John Goyens. And all of these men are the ones who are sort of shaping the future NHLers, and they're kind of the Scotty Bowmans of their little community. That's really been neat. And then as far as two of my favorite stops were Thompson, Manitoba, just because every kid in town came out. It was a little bit of an outreach show. They served us caribou heart for our meal at lunch, which is kind of unique, or is unique. And then we went down to Grand Falls, Windsor, Newfoundland, and that, for me, on a Sunday morning was a flight first to Halifax, then to St. John's, then to Gander, and then a 90-minute drive. And you think to yourself, what in the world could be interesting about hockey in Grand Falls, Windsor, 3 flights and a 90-minute drive away? Turns out their team won the Allen Cup that year, the Cataracts, and the first guy from Newfoundland to play in the NHL, Alec Faulkner, was from there, and it just didn't stop. And that sort of is the story everywhere we go. There's about 10 great tales to be told. It's amazing.
You guys are in Swift Current, and this is Saturday, is Hockey Day in Canada. What's going to be going on in that community, and just sort of give me a rundown of events and what you yourself and Tara will be doing?
Well, she's here tonight for the concert, and then she flips over to Whistler to to report into Scotiabank Hockey Day and be ready for the Rogers broadcast the next day. But she is here tonight, and she's going to sing. It's interesting. The last time we were in Swift Current for Rogers hometown hockey was 3.5 years ago, and it was the night that David Bowie died. And Tara is a singer. She was in a band called Joy Drop, and she also released a solo album, and she's classically trained. And she looked up to, as she does in her, she's an unbelievably ethical influence. She always wants to be she doesn't want to be, but she is a role model for women in sports journalism, but she used to be that in music, and she loved Annie Lennox and Chrissy Hines, and she was a big fan of Deborah Harry of Blondie, and those were her heroes, but she really, above them, she admired David Bowie. So tonight she's going to sing Suffragette City for the crowd here. It'll be a real surprise for us. And then the show goes on at 11 o'clock on the weekend. The Oilers play San Jose as part of the primetime game, which has got Montreal and Toronto also at that time, which is 5 o'clock Mountain. And we've got tons of great stories, like really lovely stories. And the other neat thing we're doing, I think, is we're opening the broadcast. I still haven't figured out how I'm going to say it, but we want to pay homage to the first responders, right? Obviously, I walked into ICU with Don Cherry on April the 8th to visit the Humboldt Broncos survivors. At that point, we had 14. We lost Dana Bronze, the trainer. But I have a line that, it was a paradise built in hell, because it was such a hopeful place. It was unbelievable to be with the Streshnitskys and the Wassermans, so grateful that their boy was alive. Paralyzed, yes, alive. And it was just an unbelievably moving experience to be in that ICU unit that day at Royal University Hospital. So the woman in charge of triage on that fateful night, April 6th, her dad was the first Mountie on the scene with the Swift Current crash in 1986, Bob Harriman of the RCMP. And then his daughter, Susie, takes care of being the point person for the Humboldt Broncos situation. So father-daughter, all those years apart, connected with doing the rescue. So we're going to do that and sort of really have a lovely tribute to first responders right out of the gate.
Incredible stuff, Ron. And that's available to watch right across the Sportsnet network of channels, correct?
Yep, absolutely. We'll be on, as I say, 11 a.m. It starts, there's about an hour of stories, and then we get into the first of our games is Winnipeg, Ottawa, and then the late game is Calgary, Vancouver. So we're lucky to have the 7 Canadian teams kind of drive the ratings for us, and then everybody just, I always say, just make it your screensaver that day, throw it on the TV, and for 12 and a half hours you can enjoy the game.
All right, Ron, we're winding this down right now, but I do want to touch on one last thing with you. You're a level 5 referee, and lots is made in this city about how Connor McDavid is officiated, or sometimes not, depending who you ask. I just want to know, with your experience and somebody who's obviously very deeply involved in hockey, what do you make of all that?
Well, it's funny. Marty McSorley and I were chatting this morning about when Wayne, eventually they started to really... Chris Chelios was the first guy to go at him. Most guys were terrified of Wayne, of course, and they would back off. But then Chelios was the first to start racing right to him up in the neutral zone and trying to smash him into the boards or do whatever he could to cordon Wayne off or force him to move the puck early. So Wayne eventually had to deal with that same thing that Connor's going to have to confront. And I agree there are times when it feels like... maybe it's because he's so fast they don't catch it. I don't know. It does feel like he's targeted. It feels like a lot of the stars are targeted in the modern game, and that's one of the side effects of cleaning it up. Ironically, we've got a feature on Dave the Hammer Schultz here on the weekend, and when I look at the video, I'm in shock at how vicious and ugly, really, the game was in the 1970s. We didn't notice it, but it was bad. So it's good that we've made strides to allow supposedly the skill to shine, but yeah, Wayne had to deal with it, and I'm afraid Connor's going to have to deal with it, and there's no way that it'll be a policeman coming in to take care of it anymore.
We appreciate the time, the insights, and, of course, the stories, Ron. I guess you're already in Swift Current, so I won't wish you safe travels, but certainly enjoy the festivities coming up this Saturday, Hockey Day in Canada in Swift Current, Saskatchewan.
Thanks, Brenden. Say hi to Eileen for me.
Absolutely. And Randy Kilburn, too. I got to sneak that in there.
Oh, good. Yes. Great. We're everywhere. We're our own little web of... Red Deerites.
That's right. Thank you so much, Ron. Take care.